Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studio in Atlanta, Georgia. It's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by Kennesaw State University's Executive MBA program, the accelerated degree program for working professionals looking to advance their career and enhance their leadership skills. And now, here's your host,
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, KSU's Executive MBA program. Without them, we couldn't be sharing these important stories. Today's show, the topic is the strategic enemy, how to build and position a brand worth fighting for. Our guest today is Laura RIES. She is the author of the book, The Strategic Enemy, and chairwoman of the company RIES. Welcome.
Thanks so much for being here, for me being here.
We're all happy that we're all here.
Yes, we are.
So before we get too far into things, just tell us about RIES. How you serving folks?
Well, we do brand strategy and positioning work, of course, known for our books for many years. This is one of many of the RIES books, starting from positioning and the 22 immutable laws of branding. And so we work on top level positioning strategy with clients around the world, as well as give speeches and do other workshops and of course the books.
Now, is most of your work with enterprise level organizations, or some of these strategies, can they work for small or mid-sized businesses as well?
Yeah, we don't focus on any one type of business or industry or size or anything, because we're all thinking about, how that brand is positioned in the mind. And the mind doesn't care how big your business is. So we have, over the decades, and I've been at this 3 decades, worked with Global 500s as well as entrepreneurs and startups, nonprofits, institutions, all types of businesses, companies, and organizations to help them with their brand of what they stand for in the mind of the consumer.
Now, in this book, The Strategic Enemy, are you talking, is the enemy your competition? Is the enemy something else? Like, why the word enemy?
Sure. Well, as I said, our focus has always been about positioning, and positioning is about owning an idea in the mind. But really the best way to, get that idea in the mind understood is by contrasting it to something. And that's what the strategic enemy is about. It's that oppositional force that your brand or category stands against. Now, yes, it could be a competitor. Many times it is. It many times is another category, right? You're a new category and the enemy is the old category. We've got electric vehicles then, and we have gas vehicles. It could be a convention of, the old way of doing things, or a concept or an idea. It's just something that you are against, right? It is what you say no to, what you are not. And sometimes by clearly defining what you're not, it makes it easier to understand what you are.
So if you were counseling a new brand, is this something that would be at the forefront? Are you trying to kind of really understand, what they stand for and then where they fit into the matrix of the decision-making process?
When thinking about, branding and positioning, differentiation is a core idea necessary to build a brand. You want, if you can be new first, you're pioneering an idea or somehow being different than what's already out there and available. Why? That drives interest, excitement, and shows the reason for your being. And really, most times entrepreneurs, they start a company because they see a problem. And often that problem is the strategic enemy that you're there to solve. Kim Kardashian, she went up against Spanx, which was beige, and her shapewear is inclusive of all colors and sizes, because that was an issue that Kim was facing. She was having to put her shapewear and, try to get it a darker color to match her skin tone. And that, became a core principle of what her brand stands for and what it stands against.
But when she started and she was Kim Kardashian, she wanted to stand out and be noticed as an influencer. So her strategy, how did she differentiate herself at that time, at the beginning? Because it's easy to talk about a lot of these brands that we know now, but that's not how they started.
Well, Kim Kardashian, the thing, if she became famous, right? She became a famous celebrity personality and in the media and keeping up with the Kardashians. But she also put and attached her brand and her celebrity and tried to pitch many products. Most of them are forgettable and we don't remember. It was the one business that really, I think, connected to what she stands for and her beautiful shape, being, a standout feature that is very recognizable, but also solved a key, problem and hole in the marketplace itself that was not being filled by everyone else. And so you have the traditional brand Spanx, and then for a newer generation, always, what the young girls don't want to wear what their moms wore. And I'm a mom and I'm wearing Spanx, right? And so the younger girls are maybe wearing Skims as, a choice of a new generation. That's always an opportunity in branding. But here, that is one example where you have a celebrity, but that's not necessarily, part of the equation. There's many examples. How about dude wipes? These were some guys out of college who realized, the benefits of using baby wipes and said, why isn't there a product for us? Something that's flushable, that has, branding that speaks to us, that, really gets the job done. And they did a tremendous job by going up against the enemy, which was the category dry toilet paper, and became a fabulous success.
So if you were starting from scratch and say you're just a professional service B2B firm,
yeah,
how would you go about, say you just graduated college, you're an accountant, you want to put up your own shingle and be Laura Accountant, how would you go about building a position for yourself?
Absolutely. Another one of the key principles of positioning, of building a brand, is having a narrow focus. When you try to be everything to everybody, how are you going to communicate that? Even if it's true, it's very difficult, almost impossible to communicate. So a narrow focus is key. It means, saying no to something, being a specialist in something. And so, yes, if I was setting up my own B2B accounting firm, I would think about what can I focus on, right? Is it going to be the size of the companies I serve? Is it going to be the speed of how I serve? Or am I more personal? Am I more electronic? Am I more old school? What one thing can set me apart from, again, looking out about the competition? Who is my strategic enemy? Is it the big firms, right? And I'm the more personalized touch because you're working directly with Laura and Laura's going to sign off on everything. All of those things. Or maybe I have a specialty that I only work with personal trainers and that's my specialty, right? Or maybe it's doctors. All of these things can be leveraged to be able to narrow your focus so you can stand for something, you can be remembered, and you could be seen as the best in class into whatever category you've set yourself up in.
So if you were this accounting firm, so the first step, is it assessing what your superpower is or what your interest is so you can specialize? Is that the first step?
Yeah, but I think that has to be done in parallel to what else is out there in the marketplace, because too often, you're right, you think about what's my superpower, what I want to do. Well, that's well and good and important, but if somebody else already owns that space, if, Larry is set up a block away and he has the same specialty I want to be in, and Larry is known by everybody, it's going to be very hard for me to, nudge Larry out unless I have something that can truly differentiate myself. Maybe I need to tweak so I can, better distinguish myself, find that open hole and opportunity that's not being served out there that I can stand for. And hopefully I'm excited and good at it too.
So in concert, you have to identify what you're good at, because you don't want to own a space that isn't something you like or are good at, right? That's not going to help in the long run. But you also want to find kind of the blue ocean area where there may not be somebody else right now in that space, so that it's more affordable for you to invest resources to own that sliver rather than, like you said, go for the whole pie. Absolutely.
There. Yeah. And think about it. And most times, companies or even people are chasing, whatever the hot brand, whatever the hot product is, right? Everyone's jumping on to copy that. Instead, sometimes the best thing is to go in the opposite direction and do something totally different. Even think about what did Liquid Death do? All water was sold in plastic bottles. Well, They went the opposite and put it in cans, right? I mean, that was a major difference. And it also set up, I mean, their stance was, the death to plastics, that plastics was ruining our environment. And then also positioned it in cans that had, a more loud and beer-like marketing, if you will, so that people that, didn't want to be drinking alcohol could have and hold a can that was just as cool as if they were.
And they had the kind of sense of humor and the wink at, water is supposed to be good for you. And this is positioned as liquid death. So, yeah. I mean, does humor work in a B2B setting?
I think it can. Look at, if you go back in history, look at what Salesforce did. I mean, with their, end to software and no software, and they were picketing Oracle conventions, and they really went all out on talking and proclaiming how software was the enemy, software was not the future, and made a very bold stance of it. Now, listen, I mean, humor doesn't have to be, part of it, but I think the core essence is if you can stand for something, you can have, fun and hopefully maybe even visual ways to talk about it. I worked with a software development company, and what was their, difference? What was their focus? Well, they're in South America, and that is in fact different. It's, and they were worried. They was like, oh, well, should we don't really want to promote that. We want to try to look like we're global. Well, I'm like, you're not, 90% of your people are in South America. Your name, in fact, was Southworks. And so, the best thing we can do is to own it, promote it, and build, in fact, the reputation. And it has been on the rise of South America as being a fantastic place for development. It's got time zone affinity, right? It's not 12 hours ahead or behind like Eastern Europe and India. And so there was a lot of advantages. And so we honed in on that. And not only that, they went, again, what else could we say no to? I mean, thinking about, instead of serving your customer, what more can we give them? What can we say we won't do? And one other thing they said is we don't do long-term contracts. In fact, we named it development on demand. So you could ramp it up, ramp it down. You're not, beholden to anything. It was totally flexible. And that was a way that, for people to grasp and understand what you are and by defining exactly what you're not.
Now, is the customer the same? Like your company goes back a while in terms of being around, involved in marketing and advertising, obviously. Is the consumer of marketing and advertising, are they behaving in the same way that they did, 50, 60 years ago? Is the brand hold as much weight and give the consumer as much confidence in a world where I can go to Amazon and buy an item with some name I can't even pronounce in a list of, similarly named products?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with the first thing. I mean, people are basically the same, but, think back to, as many may know, I worked with my dad for decades. And, when he wrote and talked about the problems of advertising in the 1970s, and he said it was, there was too much communication, the over-communicated society. I mean, it's kind of laughable. We think back now that was the good old times. There were 3 channels on the TV. But that was the start of it in terms of initially advertising. There were so few media out there and so few people could afford advertising. It was fantastic, right? So if you just got some ads out with a fairly decent product or service, you were golden. Well, those days certainly are long gone. And, the reality is people don't love advertising, right? They don't want to have advertising. What advertising is incredibly effective and important today, even today, is as a reminder to people, to remind you of the power of the brand, of the company, of the category. And here's the thing, when you mention about going to Amazon and, getting the knockoff at a good price, delivered tomorrow. People don't really care about brands. That's the fallacy. They care about categories. And it is we verbalize those categories as brands. And, if that brand is strong and it can be symbolic and, used as a stand in for the category itself, it becomes powerful. So you have Kleenex tissue, right? You have Bounty paper towels. And for people, buying Bounty or Kleenex is the real thing. Anything else is a substitute. Now, maybe some people do want to save money, and they will, but those brands have tremendous power as being the real thing and dominating those categories that in most cases, they were the brand that pioneered them as the quicker picker upper or the first, facial tissue in a pop-up box. Those are powerful ideas. The problem long-term at too many companies is, the weakening by a line extension of putting one brand name on too many categories and products. That's what some brand like Scott did, right? It was Scotty's toilet paper. It was Scott toilet paper. Then it was Scotty's tissues and paper towels and napkins. All of a sudden, it just became a company name with no real power, no real emotion. It wasn't a substitute for any one category itself, and it lost its power and really then ability to drive, profits and margins and all those good things that a real brand will deliver. And so, we see both of those things happening out in the world where there are places where, the brands are so weak, they don't really deliver, and people, will buy anything on Amazon because it seems like a reasonable substitute. Yet in many categories where you have those strong brands, it's for me, it's Tide or nothing, or Bounty or Kleenex or many of these products. And so, that's the real difference. And that's the true opportunity of owning something and becoming the real thing in those categories themselves.
But is the younger generation as brand loyal as maybe our generation was? Does it mean the same? Like, does Tide mean the same to a 20-year-old today as it did to us or our parents?
Well, if it doesn't, shame on Tide, because what an opportunity. But today we have Tide. There's a lot of line extension. Tide Pods for one. Is it a liquid or a pod? I don't know. They're confusing people. But you do build that mind memory of those brands. That is the challenge, because a new generation is born. New people are born every day. And so the consistency of those brands and understanding what they stand for and, continuously reminding of that, like Chick-fil-A and the chicken sandwich and telling us to eat more chicken. You've got BMW, the ultimate driving machine. Those are powerful ideas of companies that are dedicated to it. So it is in fact a challenge for these companies to make it relevant to a new generation and continually reinforce that one key idea. But sure, I think the younger generation is just as interested in brands if those brands can clearly communicate their difference and their importance to them. But here's the thing. Not all brands are going to survive, right? Some brands will, unfortunately, are going to pass away. We've seen in our lifetime, things like Blockbuster Video and Kodak Film. Why? Not because the brands were sad or weak. It was those categories themselves, suffered a demise. And those brands, as a result, were not able to kind of go on into the future because they were too entrenched by owning and standing for those, deceased categories in the mind. But
it's kind of a double-edged sword, though, because you can die on your hill, and when your technology has been disrupted, and then you're the last one standing, advocating for the Kodak film in a world that doesn't use film. So
that's okay. Don't you worry. I've got the answer for you. It is called giving birth to your own enemy. Companies need to launch new brands instead of thinking, how can we use our Kodak name on Kodak Digital, right? Or Blockbuster on Blockbuster streaming, or these things. The real opportunity for companies, and the one that is going to ensure their future success, is always looking for ways and new categories and new brands they can launch. Where would Toyota be if they didn't launch Lexus? Where would the Gap be if they didn't launch Old Navy? And one of my favorites, Mike's Hard Lemonade. This was a big success in the early 2000s. As kids were turning away from beer and looking for other drinks, this was a hard lemonade. But then what happened? We all realized how much sugar, calories, and carbs were in those things, right? This was a big problem. What did they do? Well, yeah, they did do some line extension, but then they thought of a new brand and a new category called hard seltzer, and they called it White Claw. White Claw has dominated the market and made the company more successful than ever. That's the exciting opportunity, not trying to, maintain the past success of those brands because, sometimes things do go out of fashion. And you continue that and drive it as long as it goes. But the real chance is to launch those new brands and new categories. And it's something more companies need to think about doing.
So to kind of, put yourself or that brand out of business or be open to Netflix is kind of doing that, but they kept the brand Netflix. I mean, they're one of the few places that blew themselves up.
Yes, well, I cover the Netflix story in full in the book because it's such an interesting case. They were the pioneer, as you and I'm sure remember, the DVDs by mail, right? So
the enemy was Blockbuster. That was an easy one. They were following your playbook.
They were.
And then they said, you know what? I see the future and it's not this. And then let's just do streaming.
That's right.
And we'll do House of Cards. And now we are this other thing here that's even better than forget about mailing things back and forth. But that is the exception. I mean, there's a short list of companies that did that.
Well, here's the thing about Netflix. What they didn't do was wait for streaming to be big and then jump on it. They pioneered streaming. They did streaming before anyone even thought it was a good idea. In fact, they gave it away initially to their, mail by, DVD by mail customers. They kind of get them hooked because back then streaming sucked. We didn't have good Wi-Fi. It wasn't very good, but they got in the mind early with the category itself. And then they one day when they said, that's it, we're going all in on streaming, no more DVDs, they just shut it down. They didn't shut it down, but they stopped talking about it. That was they tried to, it's a long story, but they tried to rename it Quickster and do all these things. And they realized, don't make a whole hullabaloo about it. We just very quietly never talk about the DVDs again. And about a decade or so later, it finally shut down. Everything went into Netflix being, the streaming service and building and pioneering the category. The thing is, most companies, they can't do it because they weren't first, right? So Redbox, they were the pioneer of the, DVDs in the supermarket, right? Terrific. Yeah, they jumped on streaming, in the way after, Netflix was a huge success. Jumping on later as a Me Too ain't going to work. You can't make that transition. You can only do it if you're the pioneer. And that happens, as to your point, very few and far between times. Most often companies sit around like Blockbuster. At the very end, Blockbuster, Nokia, dumb phones are making a ton of money before, it all goes away with a shift to a new category. And as a result, a new brand for that category, like the iPhone or like Netflix and streaming.
It's hard for, any business that's mature and has a board of directors. The person that's signing off on taking that kind of risk is, again, a very short list. Only an entrepreneurial organization could pull something like that off.
It's you do have to have a very tough stomach. Another one that did it was NVIDIA. And why? Because Jensen Huang is he's got a stomach of iron. A brilliant, an entrepreneurial type of CEO leading that company. And, they did a lot of amazing things in pioneering the GPU and the graphics, processor for, basically high-end gaming PCs. And then what did he do? He made a dramatic shift to refocus the company on AI chips, which at the early days, everyone said he was crazy. The stock price took a huge hit. But he saw the future. And, sometimes, these people like Elon Musk seeing electric vehicles. And he, honestly bet the company's future on it. And of course, it, paid off spectacularly because in today, everyone's into AI, but, NVIDIA is the leader in chips.
But is this like kind of a survivor bias where, we're not remembering all the ones that went all in on the bad bet that didn't make it?
Well, little, but I mean, I do think in terms of, and here's the thing, NVIDIA was doing fine. And I think, that the GPU was, a big success. But, even greater success. What I study is, of course, you study things that fail, but when you look at the successes, what was the thing that happened? And if you look at it, it is being first, pioneering, jumping lead on the bandwagon doesn't, usually lead to success. Line extensions don't usually lead to success unless everybody else is line extended too. So that's where, these rules are, you can look at a case and say, oh, well, if all the beer brands were line extended, so line extension is a good idea. Well, what if there wasn't one? Right. And you see then the rise of brands like, for example, athletic beer, a beer pioneered to, be not the only brand that you can order, by name, as, they've all in on non-alcoholic, rising and really making a big deal about the category. It only comes in cans because they feel it's for, active lifestyles, taking it places. And because they're focused, they can really have fun with the messaging. I mean, to your point about, using humor, well, they can go all in on it and say, why are you still drinking alcohol? Don't you want to wake up and have a better tomorrow? I mean, they can go in on it where, Heineken Zero, how can they say alcohol's bad when, 99% of their business is selling Heineken with alcohol?
So that you have to have congruity, like it has to all make sense in the mind of the consumer, or else they're going to call it inauthentic, or maybe subconsciously they're going to rebel against it and not buy it.
Yeah, look, you don't stand for anything. I mean, that's where, how do you establish authenticity, right? I mean, it's kind of this mythical type of thing. And I do think consistency is a big part of it, of being one thing, standing for it, and then, of course, reinforcing it, for many years and having, authentic spokespeople that can, be the voice and talk about it. I mean, that over time, change is what undermines it. And that's where you see the strong reactions to companies when they make even minor changes to a logo. I mean, two great examples. You look back at when Tropicana dropped the orange in the straw. I mean, the consumers revolted. Can you imagine? Just for a logo and a package, it was the same orange. They didn't touch the orange juice. It was still, fresh from concentrate, not fresh juice from the orange, not from concentrate, right? I mean, that was a pioneering idea. And then, the more recently we have the Cracker Barrel debacle, where they took off the, iconic. I mean, when you have a visualization of your brand, specifically your brand name that is very well known, removing it tends to be very jarring to people. And you see the results of the, all of the consumer uproar around it.
Now, it sounds like a lot of your work, you're not just sitting in an ivory tower coming up with great ideas. Research is at the heart of what you're doing. You're kind of looking at case studies and you're understanding, or you're trying to understand what is kind of the common threads where, let me connect some dots that maybe other people aren't seeing. Is there anything that came up in your research that maybe went against what you anticipated and surprised you?
Good question. I mean, you definitely, you definitely got to get out into the marketplace, out in the muck. I think research is important. Most importantly, researching what people are thinking about right now. The one thing that's very difficult is, to try to predict what people will do in the future. No one knows, right? It's very hard to say what they would do when given a choice of a new brand, for example. But I'm trying to think of, there's nothing really too shocking. I mean, most of the situations, it tend to be pretty straightforward. It's just always, I find the stories of these brands, fascinating. I mean, looking back and studying the history and of course the brands that, I've worked with for long times. And so no, I can't think of a good story on that one.
What about how Costco's been able to build the Kirkland brand that goes kind of against what you were saying earlier about Scott's, where there's one Kirkland brand. There's not, the Kirkland batteries are the same as the Kirkland jelly beans. It's we all know that they're being made by another leading producer of those items, but it's all going under the Kirkland brand, and the Kirkland brand is kind of dominating as a private label brand. I don't know if there's many other private label brands that are larger than Kirkland, and it's really driving a lot of revenue for Costco.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So
well, here's the thing. I mean, Costco is a fantastic idea, right? I mean, the warehouse approach, they have, they stock fewer items. They make all their money on the membership card, right? So they can, sell the stuff dirt cheap. So you always feel like you're getting a deal. It's also a pleasure to go there because there's not, 18 choices. There's basically one choice in each category, or there's the one choice and there's the Kirkland choice. Now, here's the thing. They've built Kirkland over, many, many years. It's a nice, simple name, and they're very strategic about what they go in against and up against, right? So they pick categories where they really feel they can deliver, a good quality. They can, match or, beat expectations, and have, a good shot where people will, be very inclined to go with the Costco brand in those things. But Costco is, it itself is, people have such a strong feeling about it. And because they love Costco, because they know Kirkland is Costco's brand, that has built a very strong reputation. And so in any case where the, big named, national brand is a little bit weak, that leaves an opportunity for, Kirkland. People will jump over to Kirkland. And once they then have a good experience with the product, they keep going back, and people are very loyal to both Costco and Kirkland.
And they've been able to really, I think, dominate and attract a younger audience. This isn't a brand that's just your grandfather's Costco. I mean, young people are flocking to Costco nowadays.
Kitty, my son and his girlfriend, I mean, they're obsessed. I mean, that's their daily ritual. I mean, and what a, interesting way, because they have, been very approachable to the younger generation. And I think because they want to save money, there's a atmosphere of going and shopping in person, right? That,
and discovering that, that deal or that thing that you never knew you wanted and found, that treasure hunt kind of,
the experience of going and touching and sampling is very, very strong. And I think, relevant just as much to my generation as to the younger generation, and continually to not only do it, but outdo themselves, right? They haven't gotten lazy, right? They are continually to improve, their methods, their store, their Kirkland brand, what they're doing. All of that is very strong, instead of, trying to go out in different directions. Now, I know they have an online, but, that in-store experience is so critical, and they do such a great job of it. Another one is Trader Joe's, right? I mean, they also have, their home brand kind of focus and make it also a simple, pleasurable experience. It's a smaller footprint of store. You don't have a lot of options, and and trust that Trader Joe's is going to deliver, a highly, quality, curated brand product, etc.
So if you were counseling some of the others in the markets, like how does a Kroger or a Publix, how would you, if you were counseling them, how would you counsel them in terms of differentiating vis-a-vis a Trader Joe's or a Costco?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, they're a little bit stuck, what I call in the mushy middle, right? Because you've got at the high end, you've got the Whole Foods and you've got the premium markets. And then at the low end, you've got the Costco, which kind of is a premium low end, right? Discounts. And you've got, the behemoth, which is Walmart. So, what is a Kroger, right? It's not as, fancy and premium as Whole Foods, but it's not as cheap as Walmart. It's probably a little bit more convenient. You don't have to drive as far. But I think one thing, I mean, fresh for everyone, I think is a good message and slogan for Kroger, because they are the neighborhood store. The fact that, and if they need to deliver on it consistently across all stores, but the ability to have that good pricing, fresh for everyone, is probably their best bet. And, the in-store experience and making sure that is, stellar. a challenge, but maybe, an opportunity. Publix has done a very good job on the service angle, right? Where shopping is a pleasure. Again, you got to deliver on that. That isn't, necessarily easy, as, you don't have enough shopper lanes or, help at the checkout. But that perception and the if you can succeed in, getting that idea, people remember Publix is a pleasure to shop, but you better deliver when you get in there. Because when people don't have that matching and there's a disassociation, that can be problematic. And listen, that's what has happened in Target, right? So Target had a very good reputation as cheap chic, right? Walmart was always low prices, but Target was a little bit more fashionable, right? They had a little bit more design touch. The stores were nice and clean, a little bit friendlier. But as costs went, were tough, and they lost some of that focus, and they had some, bad customer experiences. They've been having some, tough times recently. So it's, once you own an idea, you've got to continually, keep the pedal to the metal on it, right? Continually to get better at what you're doing, reinforce in what you're doing, and, continuing to drive that growth.
And it's hard when you're tying yourself to fashion, which is so subjective and fickle. That's a tough one. You really got to be nimble, because things change, and you better be moving, or else you're old news.
That is very true. It is always, difficult, which is crazy, because what you've seen recently is Walmart trying to become more fashionable. They were at Fashion Week. They do these spreads. I mean, it is just insane, because the thing you cannot do is change a mind that's already made up. And to most people, Walmart is not where you go for fashionable stuff. Cheap? Yes. Right? Low, the best brands at always low prices. Absolutely. Why isn't anyone ever happy with having an amazing focus and business? Why does the grass always look greener? I mean, you probably remember back, Sears. What did Sears? I mean, Sears was the dominant hard goods leader. Yet they were running campaigns, the softer side of Sears, and trying to sell dresses and ladies' fashion. Disaster. When you have something so strong, you're not going to be able to change a mind. And I don't know why companies waste their time doing it.
Yeah, for Walmart, the thing that I struggle with is, I don't like to go into it because it's a mess. There's stuff on the floor. It's just a terrible experience for me to go in and do anything in there. But I never consider them online, where I wouldn't have to deal with any of that stuff, and I would just have the good price part of it. But there's a disconnect in my mind, like you were saying earlier, that once it's locked in, it's hard to unlock it.
It's nearly impossible. And the funny thing is, you got to go back to Walmart, because they've made strides in making their stores much cleaner and much more organized. And but listen, that's why perceptions last a long time once they're strongly in that mind. And so, they've been really fighting to battle back for people who did have that experience. But, they've done very good in store, and they're trying to ramp up. And it's interesting you say that, because I just recently used the Walmart website to buy something. I kind of wanted to do my own customer research to test it out. Listen, it was pretty nice experience, actually. But who thinks of it? I go immediately to Amazon. I mean, trying to change my behavior to go to Walmart, which I instantly, as soon as you say Walmart, I think a store, is a big challenge. I mean, again, they would have had such a great opportunity for a second brand in that case. I mean, you think about, you have, PetSmart, which is, the store where you go for your pet stuff and buy pets. But Chewy as a second online brand is such a great move, right? They purchased it, but they kept it separate. And so Chewy becomes the dominant, online shopping experience that can go all in on that. Yet you still keep the pet stores, because if you need to buy fish or want to buy your kid a lizard, we've got a leopard gecko. I mean, I really don't think you can order those online. That'd be kind of weird. Not to mention the fresh crickets the thing eats like 5 times a week. But keeping those separate, each can, do best at what it does best. And that's the opportunity that too many companies miss.
Yeah, and I was saying that now there's Chewy Vets, or there's some licensing of the brand for vets.
Yes. Well, there is, there's online docs for people, and now we're getting these online doc brands for pets. But think about it. Do you want a pet in a Chewy doctor, or do you want like a more appropriate doctor kind of website. I mean, the opportunity to go to, I mean, there's no advantage in, when online something is a click away, you can go to a specialist. I mean, the specialist has great advantage. And, taking that opportunity instead of companies thinking, what else can we get into? What else can we leverage our brand, instead of thinking maybe that might weaken our brand. And maybe we can set up a new brand.
So when it comes to a brand and there's someone out there listening and wants to connect with you or somebody on your team, what does that ideal customer look like for RIES?
Well, anyone that has a passion for improving their positioning, building their brand, finding their focus, identifying their strategic enemy. I love to work with entrepreneurs, companies, to really get in there and understand it, to clarify things, to simplify things. I mean, it's a challenge to simplify, but when you can nail it, it leads to really great brand success and, success. But to find me, I am just at RIES.com, and it's RIES.com. We've got books, consulting, all sorts of resources to check out.
And the book, The Strategic Enemy, that's out now, right?
It is. It just came out, had the big party at the country club last week. So fun. It's been the first book I've come out with in about 10 years. So there's a lot of great updated examples, excitement on how you can best position by first identifying that strategic enemy to position against.
Good stuff. Well, Laura, a pleasure talking to you, and congratulations on all the success. You're doing such important work, and we appreciate you.
Well, thanks so much. So fun to talk.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.